I did not flinch. I did not make a sound. I just stood there in the break room of Harlow and Associates holding a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago, staring at the text on my phone screen like I was waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Consider it a going-away present. Theodore, my going-away present. I read it 3 times. I set the cup down on the counter, very carefully. The way you set something down when your hands are shaking but you refuse to let anyone see. It was the morning of my father's funeral. Let me back up, because if I start there, you'll think I'm being dramatic. And I'm not. I wish I were. My name is Ivy, and for 6 years I gave everything I had to Harlow and Associates, a mid-sized commercial real estate firm in Denver, Colorado. I started as an administrative coordinator straight out of college, 22 years old, eating the granola bar at my desk because I couldn't afford lunch near our office on 17th Street. I worked my way up to senior acquisitions analyst. I knew every client, every contract clause, every Thursday morning coffee preference of the partners. I stayed late when no one asked me to. I came in on Saturdays when a deal was close. I genuinely loved that job the way you love something that has cost you a great deal and given back just enough to keep you grateful. The firm was built by Gordon Harlow, 63 years old, white-haired, the kind of man who shook your hand like he meant it and remembered your mother's name. I respected him enormously. He had hired me personally after a 20-minute interview and told me I had the kind of mind that sees around corners. I kept that compliment folded up somewhere inside me for years. Then, 2 years ago, his son Theodore joined the firm. Theodore was 31. He had a finance degree from a school his father had donated a building to. He drove a car that cost more than my annual salary and wore watches that he rotated like a hobby. He was not stupid, I want to be fair about that, but he was the specific kind of intelligent that has never once been told no, which makes it a dangerous kind of intelligence. He believed that his presence was a gift, to the firm, to the clients, to the people who worked under him, to me. He became VP of Operations 18 months after joining. I reported to him directly. At first, I told myself it was fine. I told myself I could work with anyone. I had worked with difficult people before. But Theodore wasn't difficult in the ordinary way. He was the kind of difficult that smiles while it happens. He took my analysis reports and presented them in partner meetings without crediting me once. When I raised an acquisition flag that saved the firm a potential $340,000 loss on a contaminated property in Aurora, he sent a firm-wide email congratulating the team and mentioned himself 4 times. When I asked to be included in a client dinner I had spent 3 weeks preparing materials for, he told me, and I am quoting directly, "Clients like seeing leadership, Ivy, it's just optics." I said nothing. I went home, made pasta, and called my father. My father was a retired high school history teacher from Colorado Springs. He was the person I called when I didn't know what to do, which was more often than I liked to admit. He had this way of listening that made you feel like your problem was important, without making you feel like the world was ending. He'd say, "So what are you going to do about it?" Not impatiently, but like he genuinely believed you already knew the answer and just needed to hear yourself say it. He was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer 14 months ago. I don't need to tell you what that year looked like. If you've been through something like it, you know. If you haven't, I hope you never have to. I drove to Colorado Springs on weekends. I handled insurance calls on my lunch breaks. I learned more about medical billing than any person should have to know. I kept working because the health insurance was through my job and my father needed it, and that is simply the math of being a person in this country without generational wealth behind you. Theodore knew. I had told him directly, professionally, when I requested leave for medical appointments. He nodded and said, "Of course, family first." He said it the way people say things they don't mean but want credit for saying. My father passed on a Tuesday, quietly in the morning, with me holding his hand and my youngest sister Renee sitting on the other side of the bed. He'd asked us not to make a fuss. He didn't want machines and chaos at the end. He wanted it to be peaceful, and it was, and I'm grateful for that even now when thinking about it makes it hard to breathe. The funeral was scheduled for that Thursday. I had filed for bereavement leave the day he passed. 3 days, which is the standard in Colorado for the loss of a parent. I submitted the form, sent the notification email, and received an automated confirmation. On Thursday morning, 2 hours before the service, I was at my sister's house in Colorado Springs, helping her with the flowers. She had wanted to arrange them herself. It was something she needed to do when my phone buzzed. I looked down because I thought it might be the funeral home. It was Theodore. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Consider it a going-away present. Theodore, I stood in my sister's kitchen in a black dress I had driven 45 minutes to pick up from my own closet the day before, and I read those words, and I did not cry. I did not panic. I felt something very cold and very clear move through me, the way water goes cold all at once when a cloud passes in front of the sun. Renee saw my face. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said. "Let me help you with the eucalyptus." I did not tell anyone at the funeral. I stood at my father's grave in Evergreen Cemetery, and I listened to the pastor, and I held Renee's hand, and I thought, he would tell me I already know what to do. I did not reply to Theodore's text. I called the HR director of Harlow and Associates that evening, a woman named. I'll call her the HR director because she was kind to me and I don't want to involve her more than necessary. I explained what had happened. She was quiet for a long moment. "Ivy," she said carefully, "I need to look into some things. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Of course," I said. She called the next morning. Her voice was different. Careful in a different way. "Theodore sent that message acting unilaterally," she said. "He does not have independent termination authority. That requires co-signature from Gordon or the board. I flagged this. I want you to know your position has not been formally terminated by the firm." "I understand," I said. "Ivy, I also want to advise you, and I'm saying this carefully, that you may want to speak with an employment attorney." I thanked her. I hung up. Then I called my father's attorney, who had handled his estate for years and who gave me the name of an employment lawyer in Denver on a Friday afternoon without charging me for the referral. The employment attorney was named Susan Okafor, and she was exactly the kind of person you want in your corner when the world has decided to test you. She listened to everything. She asked precise questions. She looked at the text message, the termination timing, the bereavement leave paperwork, and she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "This is wrongful termination during a protected leave period," she said. "This is also potentially FMLA interference depending on how we characterize the medical leave you took over the past year. And doing it on the day of a parent's funeral is," she paused. "It's going to look very bad for them. What are my options?" I asked. She told me. "I want to tell you what Theodore had assumed, because I think it matters. He had assumed I would be too devastated to fight. That grief would make me small, compliant, willing to sign whatever severance document slid across the table to make the conflict stop. He had assumed that a woman who had been carefully professional for 6 years, who had never raised her voice, who had swallowed every slight and kept showing up, would keep doing exactly that. He had assumed I had no one in my corner. He was wrong on every count. What Theodore did not know, what he could not have known because he'd never once asked me a real question about my life, was that my father's college roommate was a retired judge who had practiced civil law for 30 years in Colorado. He had come to the funeral. He had hugged me at the graveside and said, "Your dad was prouder of you than he ever said out loud. That's just how he was." When I told him what had happened, standing by the reception table at my sister's house, he didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Do you have the text?" "Yes." "Screenshot it. Send it to yourself. Send it to 3 other places." "Already done," I said. He looked at me with something that might have been surprise, and then he nodded slowly. "He'd have been proud of that too," he said. The next 2 weeks were quiet on the surface. I did not go into the office. I did not respond to Theodore's single follow-up email, which arrived 4 days later and read with breathtaking audacity, "Just following up on the transition. Let me know if you have questions about your final paycheck." I forwarded it to Susan immediately. What was not quiet was what was happening at the firm. I learned this later in pieces. The HR director had flagged the termination to Gordon Harlow directly. Gordon, it turned out, had been in Portugal for 2 weeks, a semi-retirement trip he had planned for months. He came back to an inbox that, by all accounts, made him very still and very quiet for a long time before he picked up the phone. He called Theodore first, then he called me. I was in my apartment eating soup because I had not been cooking real meals, and my phone showed Gordon Harlow, Harlow and Associates, and I sat up straight on my couch like a reflex. "Ivy," he said. He sounded older than I remembered. "I owe you an apology that this firm has already failed to give you." I said, "I'm listening." He told me that Theodore had not been authorized to terminate anyone, that he had been formally removed from VP of Operations that morning, that the board had convened an emergency call 2 days prior, that they were prepared to discuss reinstatement, back pay for the period of wrongful termination, and, he paused here, a formal promotion to Director of Acquisitions, a position that had been created, he said somewhat pointedly, with me in mind when he was making succession plans before his son joined the firm. The position Theodore had effectively been blocking me from for 2 years. I was quiet for a moment. "I'll have my attorney reach out to yours," I said. Another pause. "Of course," he said. And then, "Your father was a good man. I'm sorry for your loss." "He was," I said. "Thank you." I hung up. I sat on my couch for a long time. I thought about my father, about that particular quality of his listening, about the fact that he had never once in my life told me to make myself smaller to keep the peace. Then I called Renee. "I'm okay," I said, which was not entirely true and not entirely false, the way most true things are. "I know you are," she said. "Here is what Theodore's going away present actually gave me." Susan O'Caffer filed on my behalf, the settlement which was reached without going to trial, because Harlow and Associates' legal team looked at the timeline in the text message and the bereavement leave paperwork and advised their clients very quickly to resolve this, covered 8 months of back pay, legal fees, and damages that I'm not going to specify except to say that they were significant and that I was able to do something with them I'd wanted to do for 3 years. I returned to the firm as Director of Acquisitions. My first week back, I sat in the conference room where Theodore had presented my work without crediting me, and I ran a meeting with 4 partners and 6 clients, and I spoke about a $4.2 million mixed-use acquisition in the Reno district that I had been quietly tracking for 5 months. I had done the analysis. My name was on every document. No one removed it. Theodore, I heard from the HR director some weeks later, had retreated to a consulting role at a smaller firm in the suburbs. I don't know more than that, and I don't need to. What I do know is that his father called him the same day he called me. That the conversation, by all accounts, was not brief. That whatever was said in it, Theodore arrived at the HR director's office the following morning looking like a man who had spent the night sitting with consequences. I think about my father when I walk into that building now. I think about his voice asking so, "What are you going to do about it?" And I think about how the answer was already there. Even on that Thursday morning in my sister's kitchen, holding eucalyptus in a black dress, I was going to do exactly what I'd always done. Show up, do the work, not flinch. And this time, finally, let someone see it. Renee came to visit me in Denver 2 months after everything settled. We went to a restaurant in Lodo that we never could have afforded before, and we ordered things off the menu without looking at the prices first, which is a sensation I want to describe carefully because it is not about arrogance. It is about relief. The specific, bone-deep relief of not having to calculate. We talked about our father for a long time, about how he used to fall asleep watching nature documentaries and wake up 30 seconds later insisting he had never been asleep, about the way he laughed, which was sudden and completely undignified and the best sound in any room, about what he had said to me in the hospital, in one of the last clear conversations we had. People like that, they count on you being tired. Don't get tired. I wasn't tired. I'm still not. The eucalyptus from Renee's arrangement, I had taken a small piece home without thinking in my coat pocket. I found it 3 days later, dried and still faintly fragrant. I kept it on my desk at the firm in a small glass near my monitor. It's still there. I've thought a lot about why Theodore did it that day specifically. Not a Monday. Not after I returned from bereavement leave. Not in a formal meeting with HR present. He chose the morning of my father's funeral, and I don't think that was careless. I think he believed that grief would hollow me out just enough that I wouldn't have anything left to fight with. That's the thing about people who've never had to build anything from scratch. They don't understand what's underneath someone who has. They see the composed surface, the professional emails, the measured voice in meetings, the years of showing up without complaint, and they mistake it for compliance. They think the stillness means emptiness. It doesn't. It means you've learned to carry weight without broadcasting it. Theodore had watched me absorb 6 years of being passed over, talked around, and quietly erased from my own work. He had concluded, logically from his vantage point, that I would absorb this too. What he could not have calculated was what those 6 years had actually been doing to me. Every time I documented an analysis, every time I kept a record, every time I let a slight pass without reacting but did not let it pass without noticing, I was not being defeated quietly. I was being educated. There is a difference, and the difference matters enormously when the moment arrives that requires you to act. My father taught me that, though he never said it in those words. He taught it by example, the way the best things get taught. He was a history teacher for 31 years, and he believed seriously, not sentimentally, that how you behave when something costs you something is the only true measure of character, not how you behave when things are easy. When they're easy, anyone looks fine. I think about the eucalyptus on my desk sometimes, and I think about what it took to hold myself still in Renee's kitchen that morning. It would have been so easy to react, to call Theodore back, furious and shaking, to forward that text to every partner in the firm before I even understood the full situation. Anger is fast. Anger feels like action. But anger without strategy is just noise, and noise rarely changes anything that matters. What changed things was clarity. Being precise about what had actually happened, what it meant legally, who needed to know and in what order. That kind of thinking doesn't come naturally in the worst moments of your life. You have to have practiced it. You have to have made the choice dozens of times in smaller situations to respond rather than react. Gordon called because the truth was unavoidable, not because I made it unavoidable dramatically. I didn't send one angry message, didn't confront anyone publicly, didn't perform my grievance for an audience. The documentation did it. The HR director did it. Susan Okafor did it. I had simply refused to disappear, and in refusing quietly, I made it impossible for what Theodore did to stay buried. I think that's the part that's hardest to trust when you're in the middle of something like this. That doing the right thing carefully, without spectacle, is actually enough. That integrity compounds the same way debt does. Slowly, then all at once. The settlement, the promotion, my name on my own work in that conference room. None of it came from a dramatic confrontation. It came from 6 years of showing up correctly, and then, when the moment finally arrived, from not flinching. My father asked me once when I was younger and frustrated about something now forgotten, whether I wanted to be right or whether I wanted to win. I said I wanted both. He laughed that sudden, undignified laugh of his, and said that was the correct answer, but that they usually required different things at different times, and the wisdom was in knowing which one the moment called for. I'm still learning that. I think I'll be learning it for a long time, but I know which one that Thursday morning called for, and I didn't flinch.